Have you ever wondered what the sound of pride breaking is? I found out on a cold night in March in Toronto. It's the silence that comes after you count your last coins and realize that even then, you can't buy dignity for your child. My fingers trembled, not just from the biting cold that seeped through the cracks in the window of our small apartment in the Regent Park neighborhood. They trembled from the weight of those 5 25-cent coins rolling in the palm of my hand like tiny judgments. $1.25. That was all that was left after paying the overdue rent, the heating bill that threatened to be cut off, and the asthma medication for my 8-year-old son, Dylan. "Mom, can I have something for dinner?" His voice came from the living room, where he was watching cartoons on a secondhand TV that my sister had lent another nice word for gave out of pity 2 years ago. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the ghostly aroma of a dinner that didn't exist. The last package of instant noodles had been Dylan's lunch. I had lied, saying I had already eaten at work. Work. What a cruel joke. 3 part-time jobs that barely covered our basic needs, cleaning in the mornings, store clerk in the afternoons, and when I could, some night shifts serving coffee at the General Hospital. Sure, sweetheart. I'm just organizing things here. Organizing. As if life could be arranged like clothes in a drawer. The phone vibrated on the kitchen table. Another message from my mom. "Still in this situation? You could have stayed with Paul. At least Dylan would have stability." Paul, my ex-husband who thought hitting me was an acceptable form of marital discipline until I finally found the courage to leave with Dylan 2 years ago. Stability. My family's favorite word. As if living in fear were better than living with less. I deleted the message without replying, as I always did. My sister Sarah had stopped offering help after I refused her loan that came with the condition of going back to Paul. My parents, in Vancouver, sent Christmas cards and phone calls full of "you should" and "if I were you." None of them offered real solutions, only judgments wrapped in false concern. The snowstorm that had started in the morning was now sweeping through Toronto with a fury that made the windows tremble. It was the kind of night that made any decent person stay at home, warm and safe. The kind of night when I wondered if I had made the right choices. That's when the doorbell rang. Dylan ran to the door before I could stop him. "Mom, there's a man here." My heart raced. At this hour? In this storm? I approached the door cautiously, peering through the peephole. An older man, perhaps in his 60s, stood outside, shaking violently. His clothes were soaked, and he seemed lost. "Sorry to bother you." His voice came muffled through the door. "My car broke down there on the corner. Could you let me use your phone?" "I promise I won't take long." I looked at Dylan, who was watching me with those big, trusting eyes that still believed the world was a place where people helped each other. The lessons of "don't talk to strangers" clashed with something deeper, the same instinct that made me leave an abusive marriage, the same drive that made me work 3 jobs, the same strength that kept me going when everything conspired to bring me down. I opened the door. The man looked even worse than I imagined. His expensive clothes, a wool overcoat that probably cost more than my 2-month salary, were drenched and muddy. He was shivering uncontrollably, and his hands were blue from the cold. "Come in, please," I said, stepping aside. "You're freezing." "Thank you so much, thank you really." He stepped in, dripping water on our small hallway. "I just need to call a taxi or a tow truck or—" "Wait," I interrupted, seeing how badly he was shaking. "You need to warm up first. Dylan, go get that clean towel from the cupboard." While Dylan ran to fetch the towel, I led the man into our small living room. He sat on the couch, our only decent piece of furniture, an heirloom from my grandmother, and I turned on the electric heater that we usually only used on the coldest days to save on the electricity bill. "I'm Marcus," he said, accepting the towel from Dylan's hands. "Marcus Chun. And you've been so kind." "Isabel," I replied. "And this is my son, Dylan." Marcus smiled at Dylan, who was watching him with curiosity. "You have a cozy apartment here." Cozy, a nice word for small and simple. But there was something in the way he said it, without condescension, without pity, that made me believe he truly thought our home was welcoming. "You must be hungry," I heard myself saying before my rational mind could stop me. "Can I make you something to eat?" The words left my mouth before I could process them completely. My mind screamed, "You have no food. You have no money. What are you doing?" But my heart had already made the decision. "Oh, you don't need to trouble yourself," Marcus quickly said. "I just need a phone." "Don't be ridiculous," I replied, with a firmness that surprised me. "There's a terrible storm outside. You're soaked and cold. The least I can do is offer a warm meal." I went to the kitchen and opened all the cabinets as if, by some miracle, something had appeared since the last time I looked. Nothing. The fridge had some expired condiments, a little bit of milk Dylan had drunk in the morning, and nothing else. But then I remembered the 5 coins. I grabbed my coat and turned to Marcus. "I'll just run to the corner store and buy a few things. Dylan, stay here and chat with Mr. Chin, okay?" "Isabel," Marcus stood up. "Really, you don't have to." "Of course I do," I replied, and for the first time in months, I felt a spark of something like purpose light up in my chest. It's what neighbors do for each other, right? The storm had worsened. The wind cut at my face like ice blades as I walked the 3 blocks to the only store that stayed open late. With $1.25, my options were limited. A package of instant noodles, 99 cents, would leave me with 26 cents, not enough for anything else. Or my eyes landed on a can of vegetable soup on sale, $1.20. Exactly what I had, with 5 cents to spare. A can of soup for 3 people wasn't much. But it would be warm. It would be food. It would be what I could offer. I walked back home with the compressed to my chest, protecting it from the snow like it was a treasure. And maybe it was. Not a treasure of monetary value, but something rarer. Proof that even when you have nothing, you can still choose to be generous. When I entered the apartment, Marcus and Dylan were chatting animatedly about hockey. Apparently, Marcus was a fan of the Toronto Maple Leafs, just like Dylan. "I brought vegetable soup," I announced, taking off my soaked coat. "It'll warm us all up." As I heated the soup, I divided it into 3 small bowls. Each portion would barely fill a child, but I split it equally. Marcus tried to protest, saying he wasn't that hungry, but I insisted. We sat at the kitchen table, a table I had bought at a charity thrift store for $15, and ate our soup in companionable silence. For a few minutes, we weren't a single mother struggling to survive, a man lost in the storm, and a child trying to understand why adult life seemed so complicated. We were just 3 people sharing a warm meal on a cold night. When we finished, Marcus called a taxi service that said it would take at least 2 hours to arrive because of the storm. Dylan was already yawning, so I put him to bed, leaving Marcus alone in the living room. When I came back, he was looking at a photo of us on the side table, Dylan and me on last year's Canada Day, smiling in front of the CN Tower. "You two have a nice smile," he said softly. "Thank you." I sat in the armchair across from the couch. "Sorry I couldn't offer something better. We're going through a tough time." Marcus looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. "Isabel, can I ask you something?" I nodded. "Why did you do it? Why did you give me food? You clearly don't have much." The question caught me off guard. How do you explain that sometimes the only thing you can control in life is choosing to be kind? How do you say that kindness is sometimes the only wealth you truly possess? "Because," I answered slowly, "everyone deserves a warm place on a cold night. And because I want my son to grow up knowing that we can always choose to help, no matter how little we have." Marcus was silent for a long moment, just looking at me with those wise eyes. "You're a very special person, Isabel," he finally said. When the taxi finally arrived, Marcus stood up to leave. At the door, he turned and handed me a business card. "If you ever need anything," he said, "anything at all, call me." I looked at the card, Marcus Chun Foundation. There was an address in Forest Hill, one of the most upscale neighborhoods in Toronto. Marcus, I started, but he was already walking down the stairs. Thank you, Isabel, he shouted over the wind, for reminding me that there are still angels in the world. I closed the door and leaned against it, holding the card. Outside, the storm continued to rage. But inside our small apartment, something had changed. I had given my last meal to a stranger, and in return, I had received something I didn't know I was looking for. Hope. Have you ever noticed how problems always seem bigger in the raw light of morning? As if the darkness of night were a protective blanket that reality rips away from you the moment the sun rises? I woke up on the couch where I had fallen asleep after Marcus left, with a sore neck and his business card still tightly gripped in my hand. The storm had passed, leaving Toronto covered by a pristine layer of snow that made everything seem new and clean, a cruel irony when my life felt dirtier and more complicated than ever. The apartment was freezing. During the night, the heater had been turned off automatically to save energy, and now the March cold had seeped into every corner of our small home. I heard Dylan coughing in his room. His asthma always worsened with sudden temperature changes. I carefully got up, trying to ignore the dizziness that came from sleeping little and eating even less. In the kitchen, I opened the fridge out of habit, as if by some miracle something had appeared overnight. The same emptiness greeted me, now accompanied by the hollow echo of the empty soup can in the trash. Mom? Dylan's hoarse voice came from the hallway. Can I have breakfast? My stomach tightened, not from hunger, but from a much deeper pain. How does a mother explain to her 8-year-old son that there's no breakfast? That the last coins were spent on a soup shared with a stranger the night before? Of course, sweetheart, I replied, forcing cheerfulness into my voice. How about we play a game? Let's see if we can find hidden treasures in the kitchen. Dylan appeared at the door, in his pajamas and barefoot, rubbing his eyes. His brown hair was sticking up, and he looked smaller than his 8 years, especially when he coughed. What kind of treasures? He asked, always ready to turn any situation into an adventure. I dramatically opened all the cabinets, as if it were a real treasure hunt. At the back of one of them, I found a sachet of instant oatmeal I had forgotten about and 2 sugar packets that probably came from some restaurant. Look, I exclaimed, holding up the packets like they were gold. Warm oatmeal. And sugar to make it sweet. Dylan clapped his hands, and his smile made my heart shatter and reassemble itself at the same time. How did he manage to find joy in the smallest things? How did his innocence remain intact despite all our struggles? As I prepared the oatmeal with water, we didn't have milk. My phone vibrated insistently. 3 missed messages from my sister Sarah. Isabel, we need to talk. Mom said you didn't answer her calls. If you don't call back by 10 a.m., I'm coming over. I looked at the kitchen clock. 9:47 a.m. Damn. Sarah showing up here would be a disaster. She had the gift of turning any difficult situation into a bigger crisis, always accompanied by a generous dose of I told you so and suggestions that invariably involved going back to Paul. I dialed her number while Dylan ate his small portion of oatmeal. Finally, Sarah's voice exploded from the phone. Where have you been? Mom is worried I'm worried. I'm fine, Sarah. Dylan is fine. We're dealing with things. Dealing? Her laugh was like nails on a chalkboard. Isabel, you're living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Regent Park, working 3 jobs that barely pay the bills and raising my nephew in a situation of... In what situation? My voice came out sharper than I intended. Dylan looked at me worriedly, so I forced a reassuring smile at him. You know what I'm talking about. Paul called yesterday. My blood ran cold. Paul called you? Why? He's worried about Dylan. He says he wants to exercise his rights as a father. He's thinking about filing a lawsuit for custody. The world spun. I grabbed the kitchen sink, trying to steady myself. Paul had agreed to the divorce without fighting for custody because he didn't want to bother with a child. But now, this is just manipulation, I whispered, so Dylan wouldn't hear. He doesn't want Dylan. He wants to control me. Isabel, be realistic. You can barely support the 2 of you. Paul has a stable job, a nice house in Mississauga. He can offer stability to Dylan. Stability. My voice rose an octave. Sarah, you hit me. Have you forgotten that? Or do you also think financial stability is worth more than safety? A tense silence on the other end of the line. My own sister, the person who should be supporting me unconditionally, was considering that my violent ex-husband would be a better option for my son. No one is saying what he did was right, Sarah finally said. But he's been to therapy, Isabel. People change. And you can't keep living like this forever. Living like what? Stubborn, proud, refusing help when you clearly need it. I hung up the phone. Dylan had stopped eating and was looking at me with those big, wise eyes that sometimes made me forget he was just a child. Mom, are you okay? I took a deep breath, holding back all the tears and fear for later. I'm fine, sweetheart. How about we get ready to go? You have school and I have some things to take care of. Lies. I had nothing to take care of. I didn't have money to take the streetcar downtown, where my first job was. I didn't have food for Dylan's lunch. I had no strategy to deal with Paul's threats or my family's judgment. But there was something that no one could take away from me, the determination to protect my son and our freedom. As Dylan got dressed, I looked again at Marcus Chen's business card. Forest Hill was on the other side of the city, literally and figuratively a different world from ours. What kind of man gives business cards to desperate women after accepting their charity? What kind of foundation did he run? I Googled Chin Foundation on my phone, but my prepaid internet was almost out, and the page loaded slowly. The little I could see mentioned philanthropy and support for vulnerable families. Charity. The word left a bitter taste in my mouth. Is that what I had become? A case of charity? Mom, I can't find my blue jacket, Dylan yelled from the room. My heart sank. The blue jacket, his favorite, which had cost 3 weeks of savings buying it at the thrift store, had been in the laundry for a week. I didn't have money to get it. Wear the gray one, sweetheart, I replied, grabbing my empty wallet and pretending to look for money that I knew didn't exist. That's when I noticed, under the old receipts and expired cards, there was a folded $20 bill that I didn't remember putting there. My mind raced, trying to remember when, how, why, and then I realized. Marcus. He must have slipped it there the night before when I was putting Dylan to bed. Discreetly, without fanfare, without making it seem like charity. Just kindness. $20. It wasn't much, but it was enough for transportation today, a simple lunch for Dylan, and maybe some basic ingredients for dinner. It was enough to breathe for one more day. But it was also a painful reminder. I had reached the point of depending on the generosity of strangers. We walked together to the streetcar stop, the snow crunch under our feet. Dylan held my hand with absolute confidence, chatting excitedly about a science project at school. To him, this was just another day. To me, it was another day balancing on the tightrope between dignity and despair. On the streetcar, as Toronto passed by the window in shades of white and gray, I thought about the night before. About the choice I had made to share our last meal with a stranger. About how this simple decision had resulted in an unexpected gift. Maybe life wasn't just about surviving. Maybe it was about staying human while surviving. Mom, Dylan whispered, resting his head on my shoulder as the streetcar swayed. I liked the man from last night. He was kind. Yes, I replied, kissing the top of his head. He was. And maybe, just maybe, there were still kind people in the world. Maybe I just needed enough courage to believe I deserved to find them. But first, I needed to survive this day. And the next. And whatever Paul was planning. Because if there was one thing that 2 years of raising Dylan alone had taught me, it was this. I was stronger than I knew. And when you have nothing left to lose, you find that you have everything to gain. Did you know that there is an exact moment when life decides to test if you are really as strong as you think? It's always when you least expect it, always when you're already at your limit. The first sign that this wasn't going to be a normal day came when I dropped Dylan off at school. Mrs. Henderson, his teacher, called me aside with that expression every mother learns to fear, a mixture of professional concern and personal pity. "Isabel, we need to talk about Dylan's lunch," she said in a low voice, as other mothers passed by carrying colorful lunchboxes and chatting about swimming lessons and summer camps. My stomach tightened. "Is there a problem? He's been arriving without lunch for a few weeks now. Yesterday he fainted during physical education." She paused, clearly uncomfortable. "The school nurse said it could be hypoglycemia when he doesn't eat properly." Her words echoed in my head like alarm bells. Dylan had fainted. My son had fainted from hunger, and I didn't even know. What kind of mother was I? I didn't know he had fainted, I whispered. "Why didn't anyone call me?" "We tried. The number we have on file is out of service." Of course. My prepaid phone had been cut off last week for lack of payment. I had managed to reactivate only the data, but calls were still blocked. "Mrs. Henderson, I can explain." "Isabel," she gently interrupted, "you don't need to explain anything to me. But you need to know that the school has protocols for situations like this. If a child shows consistent signs of need, we are required to contact social services." Social services. The words fell like stones in my stomach. They could take Dylan from me. They could decide that Paul, with his house in Mississauga and stable job, would be a better option. "How much time do I have?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Officially? I don't know. But unofficially." She looked around and stepped closer. "Prepare a snack for him tomorrow. Anything. And maybe consider seeking help. There are programs, Isabel. It's no shame to need support. Help. Programs. More pretty words for charity." I walked to work in a daze, Marcus's $20 burning in my pocket like a cruel reminder of my situation. In the office building downtown where I cleaned, Mrs. Patterson, the manager, was waiting for me with a stern face. "Isabel, we need to talk." "More talks. More problems. We've received some complaints about the quality of your work lately," she said, flipping through a clipboard. "Late arrivals, areas not cleaned properly." It was true. Last week, I had arrived late twice because I didn't have money for transportation and had to walk almost an hour. And yes, maybe I wasn't cleaning as efficiently. It's hard to do a good job when your only meal is a cup of black coffee. "I understand you might be going through personal difficulties," Mrs. Patterson continued, "but we can't keep employees who can't meet the expected standards." "Are you firing me?" I asked directly. "I'm giving you one last chance." "But Isabel, if there's one more problem." I nodded, not trusting my voice to respond. 3 part-time jobs, and now one of them hanging by a thread. If I lost this job, it would be impossible to pay next month's rent. I spent the next 4 hours scrubbing floors and cleaning bathrooms with an intensity that bordered on frantic. Every corner cleaned, every shiny window was a small proof that I still mattered, that I was still capable. During lunch break, a luxury I couldn't afford, I sat on the cold bench outside the building and took out my phone. 3 messages from Sarah. "Paul wants to talk to you. He says he can resolve everything amicably." "Isabel, for God's sake, think about Dylan. Think about Dylan." As if I did anything else. Then I saw it, a message from an unknown number. "Hello, Isabel. This is Marcus Chun. I hope you and Dylan are doing well. I'd like to invite you both to lunch tomorrow. Nothing formal, just a chat. If you can, call me 416-555-0147. Thanks again for your kindness yesterday." I stared at the message several times, trying to process it. Marcus Chun, the man who had left $20 in my wallet, was inviting me to lunch. Why? What did he want? My cynical mind created a list of possibilities, all bad. But then I remembered the way he had looked at Dylan, the genuine kindness in his voice. And I remembered that sometimes, when you're drowning, you have to accept the hand extended to you, even without knowing where it will take you. The rest of the day passed in a blur of anxiety and exhaustion. At my second job, as a clerk at a convenience store, I almost spilled hot coffee on a customer because my hands were trembling from hunger and nerves. At my third job, serving coffee at the hospital, a nurse noticed I looked pale and offered me a leftover sandwich from her shift. I accepted with a gratitude that embarrassed me. When I finally got home at 9 p.m., Dylan was at the neighbor Mrs. Rodriguez's house, an elderly lady who sometimes took care of him when I worked late. She didn't charge anything, only asking me to help with her grocery shopping occasionally. It was the kind of informal arrangement that worked because we both understood what it was like to fight to survive. "How was your day, Mom?" Dylan asked when we got home, his eyes still bright despite the tiredness. It was a day," I replied, helping him get ready for bed. "And yours?" "Mrs. Henderson said you did an interesting project about the solar system." He talked excitedly about Jupiter and its moons, about how Earth is special because it has life, about how stars are really just distant suns. His excitement was infectious, and for a few minutes, I managed to forget that my world was crumbling. After he fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with Marcus's card and my phone. His number was there, waiting. A possibility. Maybe the only one I had. But calling meant admitting I needed help. It meant accepting that I couldn't handle everything on my own. It meant letting go of a little piece of pride that had sustained me for the last 2 years. On the other hand, not calling meant continuing this downward spiral until what? Until I lost my job? Until social services decided Dylan would be better off with Paul? Until my family said "I told you so" as I lost the most important thing in my life? At 11 p.m., with Dylan safely asleep in his room and the apartment silent except for the hum of the heater, I finally dialed the number. It rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "Hello, Mr. Chen? It's Isabel. Isabel Martinez. From last night. Isabel." His voice warmed immediately. "I'm so glad you called. How are you both?" We're fine," I lied automatically. "I got your message about lunch." "Yes." "I hope it didn't seem inappropriate. It's just, well, after last night, I kept thinking about our conversation. And I have a proposal I'd like to discuss with you." "A proposal?" My heart raced. "What kind of proposal?" "It's better if we talk in person." "Could you meet me tomorrow? Let's say noon at the Four Seasons Hotel Cafe? I know it's a bit formal, but it's a place where we can talk privately." Four Seasons. One of the most elegant hotels in Toronto. I had never even been close to a place like that. "Mr. Chen, I don't know if I—" "Please," he interrupted gently. "Just listen to what I have to say. And bring Dylan, if you want. I think he'd enjoy seeing the hotel's decorations." There was something in his voice, a contained urgency, a sincerity that cut through my skepticism. "Okay," I heard myself say. "Noon. Excellent." "Oh, and Isabel?" "Wear whatever you're comfortable in. It's not an interview. It's just a chat between friends." After I hung up, I sat in the darkness of the kitchen, trying to process what had just happened. In less than 24 hours, I had gone from giving my last meal to a stranger to being invited to lunch at a 5-star hotel. Life had a strange way of working sometimes. But as I prepared to sleep on the couch, Dylan was growing and needed the bed more than I did. I couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would be different. For better or for worse, tomorrow would be the day I would find out who Marcus Chin really was and what he wanted with me. And maybe, just maybe, it would be the day my life would finally start to change. There are places in the world that seem to have been designed to remind you that you don't belong there. The lobby of the Four Seasons Toronto was definitely one of those places. I stopped at the entrance of the hotel, holding Dylan's hand, and for a moment considered turning back. The polished marble reflected my image back at me, a 32-year-old woman wearing her only good outfit, a black blouse bought at a thrift store and pants that had been expensive 3 years ago, accompanied by an 8-year-old boy whose eyes were wide with amazement. "Wow, Mom," Dylan whispered, looking up at the towering ceiling decorated with crystal chandeliers. "Is this where kings live?" "Not exactly, sweetheart," I replied, adjusting my bag on my shoulder. "But yeah, it's pretty fancy." A uniformed doorman opened the heavy glass door for us with a professional smile that didn't reach his eyes. I could feel his evaluative gaze, clearly identifying us as people who didn't usually frequent five-star establishments. The cafe was beside the main lobby, separated by glass panels that allowed you to see in without being fully visible. I scanned the area for Marcus and found him at a corner table, wearing an elegant suit and talking on the phone. When he saw us, his face lit up with a genuine smile, and he waved for us to come over. "Isabel, Dylan." Marcus stood up, quickly ending the call. "Did you manage to find the place without any problems?" "Yes, the streetcar goes straight here," I replied, trying not to look intimidated by the environment. "This place is impressive. It's a bit over the top, isn't it?" Marcus laughed, gesturing to the chairs. "But they make an excellent hot chocolate, Dylan. Would you like to try it?" Dylan's eyes lit up. "Can I, Mom?" Before I could respond, Marcus was already calling the waitress. "3 hot chocolates, please. And maybe some of those chocolate chip cookies." As the waitress took the order, I studied Marcus more closely. He seemed relaxed, genuinely happy to see us. There was nothing predatory or condescending in his demeanor, just a kindness that felt as natural as breathing. "So, I began when we were alone. You mentioned a proposal. Straight to the point. I like that." Marcus leaned forward, his hands clasped together on the table. "But first, let me tell you who I really am." My stomach tightened. Here it came, the part where I'd find out he was a predator, or had ulterior motives, or... My full name is Marcus Chin, and I am the founder and CEO of the Chin Foundation. We started the organization 15 years ago after my wife passed away. The vulnerability in his voice took me by surprise. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." Linda was a social worker working with at-risk families. When she passed away from cancer, she left an unfinished project, a proposal to create a program that would help single parents not just with temporary financial assistance, but with real opportunities to rebuild their lives. Dylan turned his attention to us, clearly interested in the conversation. "The Chen Foundation operates differently from most philanthropic organizations," Marcus continued. "We don't give out money. We create opportunities. We offer professional training, microloans for small businesses, mentorship, childcare during transitions, everything designed to restore dignity and independence." "That sounds amazing," I said sincerely. "But I don't understand what that has to do with me." Marcus smiled. "Isabel, last night you did something that deeply impressed me. You had $1.25, literally your last coins, and you chose to share them with a stranger. Not because someone was asking, not because anyone was watching, but because it was simply the right thing to do." I felt my face heat up. Any decent person would have done the same. "No, they wouldn't have." Marcus shook his head. "I've traveled around the world, Isabel. I've been in desperate situations and seen how people react when they think no one is watching. What you did was rare." The hot chocolates arrived, accompanied by a tray of cookies that looked like they came out of a magazine. Dylan grabbed one immediately, his eyes closing in pleasure as he took a bite. "This is the best cookie in the world," he declared, offering me a piece. "The proposal is this," Marcus continued after we had all tried the cookies. "The Chen Foundation is expanding its operations here in Toronto. We need someone to run our new mentorship program, someone who understands firsthand what it means to be a single mother struggling to survive. Someone who can genuinely connect with the families we want to help." My heart started racing. "You're offering a job?" "A full-time job, with a competitive salary, full benefits including health insurance for you and Dylan, and a position that can truly make a difference in the lives of hundreds of families." Marcus paused. "But more importantly, it's an opportunity to use your experience, your strength, and your compassion in a way that has purpose." I looked at Dylan, who was completely absorbed in his second cookie, and then back at Marcus. "Why me? You don't even know me." "You're right. I don't know the details of your life, your education, your work experience. But I know the most important thing. I know who you are as a person. And last night, when you chose to help me despite your own needs, you showed the kind of character that can't be taught. But I don't have qualifications to run a program. Isabel, Marcus gently interrupted, you have the most important qualification. You've lived it. You know what it's like to make impossible decisions, to work 3 jobs and still barely make ends meet. You know what it's like to protect your child while the world seems to be falling apart around you. That's worth more than any degree. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, and I blinked quickly to hold them back. And if I'm not good at it? What if I fail? Then you learn and try again. That's how it works. Marcus leaned forward. Isabel, can I be blunt? I've looked into your situation. I know about your 3 jobs. I know about the financial struggles. I know you're fighting with everything you've got to keep your family together. My whole body tensed. You investigated me? Not invasively, he said quickly. Just enough to confirm what I already suspected, that you're exactly the kind of person we're looking for. Strong, resilient, compassionate, and with a deep understanding of the struggles that our families face. Dylan chose that moment to join the conversation. Mom, is Mr. Marcus offering you a cool job? Yes, Dylan, I replied, still processing everything. He is. That means you won't have to work 3 jobs anymore? My son's innocent question hit my heart like an arrow. He had noticed. Of course, he had. He knew about the mornings I left before he woke up, about the nights I came home after he was already asleep. He knew I was killing myself working and still barely surviving. It means Mommy would have just one job, but an important one, Marcus explained to Dylan. Helping other families who are going through tough times, just like you guys went through. Like superheroes? Dylan asked, excited. Marcus laughed. Exactly like superheroes. I looked between the 2 of them, my 8-year-old son who deserved stability and opportunities, and this man who seemed to have fallen from the sky to offer exactly that. How much time do I have to decide? I asked. As much time as you need. But Isabel, Marcus looked me in the eyes. I know accepting help is hard. I know you have pride, and you're probably wondering if this is charity disguised. It's not. It's a legitimate job opportunity for someone perfectly qualified. The only difference is that, instead of finding you through a job ad, I found you through an act of kindness. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 2 years of struggle, sleepless nights, constant worries about money and the future, and whether Dylan would have the opportunities he deserved. There's one thing, I said finally. My ex-husband is trying to get custody of Dylan. He has a lawyer resources. If I accept this job, could it help me keep my son? Marcus's expression hardened. Isabel, the Chen Foundation has some of the best family law attorneys in Canada on our board. If you take this position, you'll not only have financial stability, but also all the legal support you need to protect your family. It was too much. It was too perfect. It was exactly what I needed at the exact moment I needed it most. Can I think about it until tomorrow? I asked. Of course. Marcus smiled. And Isabel? Thank you. For last night, for today, for reminding me that there are still truly good people in the world. When we left the hotel, Dylan was holding my hand and talking excitedly about the cookies and hot chocolate and how nice Mr. Marcus was. I walked in a state of semi-shock, trying to process that my life might be about to change completely. At the streetcar stop, I looked back and saw Marcus through the hotel windows, talking on the phone again. For a moment, our eyes met, and he waved. Maybe it was the beginning of something new. Maybe it was the answer to prayers I didn't even know I was making. Or maybe it was simply the universe reminding me that sometimes, when you reach out to help someone, someone reaches out to help you. Have you ever noticed how the most important decisions in life always come with 1,000 reasons not to make them? As if the universe wanted to be sure that you really want to change before it allows it to happen? I spent the whole night staring at the ceiling of our small apartment, listening to Dylan breathe softly in the next room and trying to process everything that had happened at the Four Seasons. Marcus's offer echoed in my mind like a symphony of possibilities: stable job, health benefits, a chance to use my experience to help other families. It was too perfect. And that was exactly the part that scared me. At 6 in the morning, I still hadn't slept when my phone vibrated. A message from a number I knew all too well. Paul, I need to talk to you today. It's about Dylan. Don't make me do this through lawyers. My blood pressure rose instantly. Paul never sent messages at 6 in the morning unless he was planning something. And the veiled threat about lawyers made my stomach churn. I got up slowly, trying not to wake Dylan, and went to the kitchen window. Outside, Toronto was waking up, people walking to work, streetcars gliding along the tracks, the normal life of a big city in motion. But inside my apartment, I felt like I was in the eye of a storm, with forces I couldn't control swirling around me. The phone vibrated again. This time it was Sarah. Paul called me. He's coming to Toronto today. Isabel, for God's sake, at least hear him out. So that was it. Paul was coming. After 2 years of leaving me alone, he had decided that now, exactly when a real opportunity appeared in my life, was the time to exercise his paternal rights. Dylan appeared in the kitchen, still in his pajamas with messy hair. Good morning, Mom. Why did you wake up so early? I just couldn't sleep, sweetheart. I forced a smile. How about we make pancakes for breakfast? It was a luxury. Pancakes required eggs and milk that cost more than our usual oatmeal meal. But after yesterday, after Marcus's offer, I felt like we needed a bit of normalcy. A little joy. As I mixed the batter, I watched Dylan coloring in a book at the kitchen table. He had grown so much over the last 2 years. When we left Paul, Dylan barely spoke for weeks, always looking over his shoulder, always tense when he heard loud voices. Now he laughed, asked questions, dreamed of becoming an astronaut or a hockey player. How could I risk that? How could I risk Paul coming back into our lives and destroying the peace we had built? Mom, Dylan said without lifting his eyes from the book, are you going to take Mr. Marcus's job? The question caught me off guard. What do you think I should do? He stopped coloring and looked at me with that seriousness that sometimes reminded me that he had seen and understood more than I'd like. I think you should take it, he said thoughtfully. Because you were happier yesterday than I've seen you in a long time. And because, he paused, as if choosing his words carefully, because you help everyone, Mom. Mrs. Rodriguez, me, even that man you didn't even know. Maybe it's time for someone to help you. Tears came without warning. My 8-year-old son had articulated something I couldn't, that accepting help wasn't weakness. It was simply recognizing that we all need support sometimes. We served the pancakes and were eating when someone knocked on the door. 3 firm, authoritative knocks. My blood froze. Who is it, Mom? Dylan asked, but from my expression, he already knew it wasn't good news. I looked through the peephole, and there he was, Paul Martinez, my ex-husband, standing in the hallway in an expensive suit with a determined expression. He looked thinner than the last time I saw him, with gray hair at his temples, but he still had that intimidating presence that made any environment feel smaller. Stay in the room, Dylan, I whispered. Now. But Mom. Now, sweetheart. Please. Dylan obeyed, but I could see him peeking through the crack in the bedroom door. I took a deep breath 3 times before opening the door, leaving the security chain in place. Paul, what do you want? Hello to you too, Isabel. His voice had that controlled tone I knew so well, calm on the surface, but with an undercurrent of irritation. Can I come in? We need to talk about our son. No. What you have to say, you can say right here. He sighed dramatically. Isabel, it doesn't need to be like this. I just want what's best for Dylan. What's best for Dylan is staying away from you. The mask of civility slipped for a second, and I saw a flash of the man who terrified me for 5 years. But he quickly composed himself. Listen, I know you're going through financial difficulties. Sarah told me about your jobs. 3 part-time jobs? That's no life for a child, Isabel. Our financial situation is none of your business. It is when it affects my son. Paul stepped closer to the door. I can offer stability. A real house in Mississauga, private school, everything Dylan deserves. Everything you can't give him. How's the stability of seeing me with bruises? How's the stability of seeing the father hit the mother? I've changed. His voice dropped lower, more dangerous. I've been to therapy, Isabel. 2 years of therapy. And I never hit Dylan. No, you just hit his mother in front of him. That's much better. Paul leaned against the door frame, and for a moment, I felt like I was back in that apartment in Mississauga, feeling small and scared. I have a lawyer, Isabel. A good one. And honestly, a judge is going to look at your situation. 3 jobs, a 1-bedroom apartment in a troubled neighborhood, a history of financial instability, and then look at what I can offer. What do you think is going to happen? My voice came out weaker than I wanted. Dylan is happy here. Dylan is a child. Children adapt. And he deserves more than this. Paul gestured toward the narrow hallway, the peeling walls. He deserves opportunities. That's when I remembered Marcus's words about having family law attorneys. About how the foundation could help me protect my family. And, for the first time in 2 years, I didn't feel completely helpless against Paul. You know what, Paul? I straightened my shoulders and looked him directly in the eyes. You're right about one thing. Dylan deserves opportunities. He deserves stability. He deserves to grow up in a home where there is no violence, where his mother isn't afraid to speak, to leave, or to live. Isabel, I'm not finished. My voice was growing stronger. Dylan deserves to see that it's possible to start over, that it's possible to choose kindness over anger, that it's possible to build a life based on love instead of fear. And that's exactly what he has here. With 3 jobs and rationed food? With you barely able to pay the bills? With a mother who works hard to take care of him? With a mother who never raised her hand to him or anyone else? With a mother who prefers to go hungry than to accept money stained with blood? Paul was silent for a moment, clearly surprised by my firmness. I have a proposal for you, I continued, and for the first time in years, I felt in control of a conversation with my ex-husband. You go back to Mississauga, go back to your life, and we'll continue with ours. Dylan knows you exist, and when he's older, if he wants to meet you, I won't stop him. But I won't let you use your influence and money to destroy the peace we've built. And if I say no? I took a deep breath, thinking about Marcus, the Chin Foundation, the possibilities that were opening up in front of me. Then you'll find out that I'm no longer the scared woman I used to be. You'll find out that I now have resources, support, and my own lawyers. And you'll find out that any decent judge will see that Dylan is thriving in a loving home, even if it's a humble home. For a long moment, we stared at each other through the crack in the door. I could see Paul processing this new version of me, a version that didn't back down, that didn't apologize for existing. This isn't over, Isabel, he said finally. It ended for me 2 years ago, I replied, when I found the courage to leave. After he left, I sat on the floor leaning against the door and cried. Not out of fear or sadness, but out of relief. For the first time since I left Paul, I had managed to stand firm in front of him. I had found my voice. Dylan came running out of the bedroom and threw himself into my arms. You were so brave, Mom, he whispered in my ear. We were both brave, I corrected, kissing his head. And you know what? I think it's time to call Mr. Marcus. I took my phone with hands that only trembled slightly. Marcus answered on the second ring. Isabel? How are you? I'm ready, I said simply. If the offer is still on the table, I accept the job. Of course, it's still on the table. The joy in his voice was evident. Isabel, you won't regret it. When can you start? As soon as possible. I looked at Dylan, who was smiling while pretending not to listen. We have a new life to build. After I hung up, I sat with Dylan on my lap, looking out the window at Toronto outside. The city looked different somehow, no longer a place where I struggled to survive, but a place where we could thrive. In a few hours, I would call Mrs. Patterson and resign from my 3 jobs. I would call Dylan's school and give them the good news that we now had health insurance. I would call Mrs. Rodriguez and thank her for all the help, promising that now I could truly repay her. But first, I would have to call Sarah and my mom. I would have to endure that I told you so, and that you should have thought about this before. I would have to explain that no, I hadn't gone back to Paul, and yes, I had found a better way. Some battles still needed to be fought. But for the first time in 2 years, I felt like I had the right weapons to win them. Mom, Dylan said, still nestled in my arms, do you think we're really going to be happy now? I looked at my son, my brave little warrior who had faced so many changes with such grace, and felt a deep certainty settle in my chest. Yes, sweetheart, I replied. I think we are. There's a magical moment when you realize that you've stopped just surviving and started truly living. For me, that moment came on a September morning when Dylan ran out to the school bus shouting, "Bye, Mom. Love you," and I realized that for 3 whole months, I hadn't worried if we had enough money for his lunch. I sat on the porch of our new apartment in Leslieville, 2 bedrooms, a real kitchen, and a view of a small park where Dylan played street hockey with neighborhood friends, holding a cup of coffee I bought because I wanted to, not because it was on sale. It was a small luxury, but it symbolized a much bigger change in our lives. My phone vibrated with a message from Marcus. Board meeting at 10 a.m. Get ready to present the mentoring program numbers. Tip: they're impressed. I smiled, grabbing my leather briefcase, a real leather one I had bought with my first full paycheck from the Chen Foundation. Inside it were reports showing how our program had helped 43 families in just 5 months. 43 families now had stable jobs, reliable childcare, and, more importantly, hope. The work at the foundation had turned out to be exactly what Marcus promised, an opportunity to transform my experience of struggle into a tool to help others. Every family I mentored, every single mother I helped create a life plan, every child I saw their parents regain dignity, all of this reminded me daily of why it had been worth accepting that outstretched hand. I left the apartment and walked to the streetcar stop, but today something was different. A black limousine was parked at the corner, and the driver waved to me. "Isabel Martinez?" he asked. "Mr. Chen sent the car. He said today is a special day." I got into the limousine, my second time in one, still confused. Marcus hadn't mentioned anything about a special day other than the board meeting. As we glided through the streets of Toronto, I remembered the night that changed everything. 6 months ago, I had spent my last coins on a can of soup to share with a stranger lost in the storm. Now, I was being driven in a limousine to present a program I ran. Life had an interesting sense of humor. The foundation was located in an elegant building in the financial district, but Marcus had made sure the space was welcoming, not intimidating. There was a children's play area, comfortable chairs instead of cold corporate furniture, and photos of families who had been helped by the program decorating the walls. When I arrived at the meeting room, I noticed there were more people than usual. In addition to the usual directors, there were several people I didn't recognize, including a stylish woman with a notepad. "Isabel." Marcus stood up with a huge smile. "Perfect punctuality, as always. I'd like to introduce you to some special people." As he made the introductions, I found out the woman with the notepad was a journalist from the Globe and Mail, doing a piece on innovative social assistance programs in Canada. The others were potential donors and government representatives interested in replicating our model in other cities. "Isabel is the heart and soul of our mentoring program," Marcus explained to the group. "She not only runs the operations, but brings an authentic perspective that makes all the difference. Isabel, would you share the results of the last quarter with us?" I took a deep breath and started presenting. I talked about Maria, the single mother of 3 who now had her own small catering business. About James, the widowed father who had landed a stable job as an electronics technician after completing our training program. About the 28 children who now had health insurance and were attending better schools. But more than numbers, I spoke about restored dignity. About families who had regained hope. About the cycle of poverty being broken, one family at a time. The key, I explained to the journalist, is not just giving money or temporary resources. It's about creating real opportunities for people to rebuild their lives with their own hands. It's about treating every family as a partner, not a charity case. After the meeting, Marcus asked me to speak with him privately in his office. "Isabel, there's something I need to tell you," he said, gesturing for me to sit down. "Do you remember when we first met? When I was lost in the storm?" "Of course. You said your car had broken down." Marcus chuckled softly. "Well, that wasn't exactly true. My car was running perfectly. I was driving through your neighborhood because I was looking for someone." My eyebrow raised. "Looking for what?" "2 years ago, my team and I identified that we needed someone with real experience to run our mentoring program. Not someone with MBAs and theories, but someone who had truly lived the struggles that our families face. I spent months researching, visiting different neighborhoods, trying to find the right person." My heart started to race. "Marcus, what are you saying?" That night, I wasn't lost by accident. I had spent the day visiting community organizations in Regent Park, asking discreet questions. Several people mentioned a single mother who worked 3 jobs, who always helped neighbors despite her own struggles, who had left an abusive marriage with a young child and was rebuilding her life with incredible strength. I felt my mouth fall open in surprise. "I was heading home when the storm really started," Marcus continued. "And when I saw the lights of your apartment, I thought, why not? Why not see if the stories I heard are true? And then you opened the door, and without even knowing me, you invited me in, warmed me up, and shared your last meal with me." You were testing me?" "No," Marcus quickly said. "It was never a test, Isabel. I really needed help that night. Maybe not with the car, but I had lost my faith in human kindness. I had seen so many people pretending to be generous for money or recognition that I forgot there were truly good people." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at Toronto below. "When you gave me that soup, when you shared your last coins with me without expecting anything in return, you reminded me why Linda and I started this foundation. You reminded me that there are still angels in the world." I remained silent for a long moment, processing everything. "So the job was real from day one. You were hired not out of charity, but because you were exactly who we were looking for. The only difference is that, instead of a formal interview process, I met you through an act of kindness." Tears began to form in my eyes. "Why are you telling me this now?" Marcus returned to his desk and picked up an envelope. "Because today marks 6 months of our program, and the results are so exceptional that the government is considering funding expansion to 5 other cities. And because," he handed me the envelope, "the board voted unanimously to promote you to Regional Director of Mentoring Programs." I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was an official letter offering a promotion, a substantial raise, and the opportunity to lead the national expansion of the program. "Marcus, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept. Say you'll help us transform lives across Canada." I stood up and looked out the window, seeing the city that had become our true home. 6 months ago, I was counting coins and wondering how I would feed my son. Now, I was being offered the chance to help hundreds of families find the same path I had found. "There's one condition," I said finally. "What?" "I want Dylan to be included in our marketing campaign. Not as a spokesperson, but to show how children benefit when their parents have real opportunities. He has some great ideas on how to make our programs more family-friendly." Marcus laughed. "Accepted. In fact, Dylan already gave me some excellent suggestions about our children's recreation area." That afternoon, the limousine took me back home, where Dylan was waiting for me with Mrs. Rodriguez. She had become our official babysitter, an arrangement that worked perfectly because I could pay a fair wage, and she loved spending time with Dylan. "How was your special day, my dear?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked in her mix of Spanish and English. "It was transformative," I replied, hugging Dylan, who ran to me as soon as I entered. "Mom, you came in a limousine," he exclaimed. "All my friends saw." "Yeah, they did. And I have good news to tell you. We sat together on the couch, a new, comfortable couch I had bought without worrying about the price, and I explained the promotion, our move to an even better apartment, how our life was about to change again. Does this mean we're going to help even more families? Dylan asked. Exactly. Cool. He paused, thoughtful. Mom, do you think that night when you gave soup to Mr. Marcus was magical? I looked at my son, now 9 years old, taller, more confident, with a light in his eyes that had been missing during all those difficult years, and smiled. Yeah, sweetheart. I think it really was. That night, after Dylan went to sleep, I sat on the porch of our apartment and called Sarah. Isabel? How are you? Her voice sounded concerned. She still wasn't used to the fact that I now called with good news, not crises. Better than ever. Sarah, I got a promotion today. A big promotion. Oh my God, Isabel. That's amazing. And for the first time in years, I could hear genuine pride in my sister's voice. You deserve this more than anyone I know. Thank you. And Sarah? About Paul, he dropped the custody case. The foundation's lawyers talked to him, and he decided it would be better to leave things as they are. I'm happy, Isabel. Really happy. You've built a beautiful life for both of you. After I hung up, I sat on the porch watching Toronto at night. The city lights stretched to the horizon, and each one represented a life, a family, a story. Some of these families were struggling like I once did. Some were losing hope like I almost did. But now I had a purpose. Now I had the resources and the platform to help them. Not with condescending charity, but with real opportunities. With dignity. With the same kindness Marcus had shown me. My phone vibrated with a message. Isabel, thanks for accepting the promotion. Linda would be proud of what you've built. Marcus. I replied, thank you for believing in me. And for reminding me that kindness always returns, even when we least expect it. 6 months ago, I had given my last meal to a stranger on a stormy night. The next day, literally the next day, a limousine came to pick me up for a meeting that would change my life forever. But the real magic wasn't in the limousine or the job or the money. The real magic was in the fact that when you choose to be kind, even when you have almost nothing, the universe conspires to give you everything. And now, every morning when I wake up, I know I have a purpose, to help other families discover that they too deserve second chances. That they too deserve dignity. That they too deserve the opportunity to transform their lives. Dylan and I have built something beautiful together. Not just a stable life, but a life with meaning. A life where we can be generous because we finally have enough. A life where kindness isn't a luxury, but a daily choice. And every time I see a family graduate from our program, every time I see a single mother land a stable job or a child enter a better school, I remember that March night when I chose to share a can of soup with a stranger. Because sometimes, when you reach out to help someone lost in the storm, you find out that they were also looking for a way to help you. And sometimes, the greatest transformation of all isn't financial or professional. It's realizing that you've always been stronger, more capable, and more deserving of happiness than you ever imagined. Kindness is the language which the deaf can hear and the blind can see. Mark Twain. This story is dedicated to all the single mothers who choose kindness even when the world seems against them, and to all those who extend a hand to help when we least expect it.